Turning to health news, naturalnews.com writer Jonathan Benson reports on the Harvard study citing how pasteurized milk from industrial dairies is linked to cancer. The truth has once again shaken the foundation of the American Tower of Babel that is mainstream science, with a new study out of Harvard University showing that pasteurized milk products from factory farms are linked to causing hormone-dependent cancers. Turns out the concentrated animal feeding operations model of raising cows on factory farms turns out milk with dangerously high levels of estrone sulfate, an estrogen compound linked to testicular, prostate, and breast cancers. A very familiar meme you see with the GMO foods, you see with the BPA, you see with a lot of stuff. And all the collective wisdom of having these centralized factory farms makes no sense. Meanwhile, raw, grass-fed organic milk from cows milked at the proper times, Jonathan Benson writes, is linked to improving digestion, healing autoimmune disorders, and boosting overall immunity, which helps prevent cancer. And of course, you've got almost all of the essential amino acids in raw milk. If it is harvested in the right way, can be very healthy. I myself enjoy some raw milk when I can get it. Now, turning to more on the GMOs, last week Alex talked to probably the preeminent GMO expert who covers Monsanto and all the other companies, many of whom congregate around the Bilderberg circles, and it's much worse than we've even previously reported. Jeffrey Smith came back on the program, reconfirmed all the stuff about how genetically modified foods in livestock, in humans, in rat studies is showing triggers of organ failure, it's showing sterility, it's showing infertility, it's showing triggers for cancer. But that's not all. It's also infecting the gut flora, and I won't quote his words directly, I'll let you hear it from him in this clip, but basically taking over the gut flora, where the immune system is located, where digestion occurs, and where so many new autoimmune disorders are located, Crohn's and all the other stuff associated with it, as well as many of the symptoms of autism, now also linked to things like GMO. Let's play the clip now.
When we look at the Bt toxin causing these pores or openings in the intestines, there's a whole new field among progressive, cutting-edge medical practitioners that are treating or looking at gut permeability. If undigested food through these holes into the blood, that might explain the rise in food allergies, autoimmune disease, inflammation, possibly autism. Because gut permeability is one of the factors that scientists are documenting accompany autism in large numbers. So I was giving a talk recently.
But wait, there's also big studies out, just to back you up again, that just came out, that they're finding the GMO DNA and RNA is actually going through the blood and into the cells. They'd always said that was impossible, and Monsanto's come out and said it's fine to have our DNA in your cells. So it's actually going through now. I think that's more than just gut permeability. It's that, you know, before we are what we eat, and all this stuff that's slowly developed on this planet, we're able to absorb, and it's part of the normal order. You start splicing and crossing and doing all of this, it shows that at a micro level, we're all interchanging at levels we never knew before.
Let's talk about just this gene transfer, because this is one of the scariest things that is currently documented. The only human feeding study ever published verified that part of the gene inserted into soybeans, making those soybeans Roundup ready, unkillable with Roundup, transferred into the DNA of bacteria living inside our intestines. And that bacteria was unkillable with Roundup. So they had Roundup-ready gut bacteria, suggesting that that gene was functioning. Now, pretend that you're eating genetically engineered BT corn chips, and the same transfer occurs. What if the gene that produces this toxin that breaks open the stomach of insects and possibly human intestines, what if that gene were to transfer to our own gut bacteria and continue to function? It might turn it may turn our flora into living pesticide factories. Now, one of the studies that came out last year gives support for this. In Canada, they tested the blood of 30 pregnant women and their unborn fetuses, and found in 93% of the pregnant women, the Bt toxin was in their blood and in the blood of 80% of the cord blood of their unborn fetuses. So what this means is that somehow the Bt toxin is getting into the bloodstream, and this is not supposed to happen according to the EPA. According to the EPA, it's supposed to be destroyed during digestion. So the authors were wondering, how come the frequency is so high? We don't eat that much corn chips and fresh corn to justify that. So they expected that it was the eating the meat and dairy from animals that have been fed Monsanto's corn, which was the source of the Bt toxin. But I think it's more likely that it was the transformation of the gut bacteria inside the intestines of North Americans, which is causing this high constant exposure. And when I talk about this to medical conferences where I speak all the time, doctors invariably tell me that the rise in gastrointestinal problems has been astronomical. Irritable bowel syndrome, for example, is up 40% since GMOs were introduced.
And this is so bombshell. I asked the guys to pull this clip. A lot of you already heard this interview last week. Go back and watch it again. Share it with everyone. This stuff is epidemic. I talked to Mike Adams about today. He straight up said we're being euthanized. This is a big, big deal. Let's just recap some of what he just said. Jeffrey Smith in this interview, he said the Roundup Ready was taking over in the gut bacteria. It suggested it was a still functioning gene. You could call it what you want. It's compatible with the total alien takeover of our body. And he commented that it appears our flora are becoming a living pesticide factory inside the womb. What is that going to do to us? It's not just the 90% of corn, the 90% of soy, and the other crops. As he pointed out, it's the animals eating this stuff that we then eat. Goes totally through the food chain. Meanwhile, the actual pesticides and the genes in there appear to be functioning, permeating the gut bacteria. This is huge. People need to look more and more into this. And then Alex brought up later in the interview how we had also come across the Bill Gates Foundation doing a lot of research on the gut flora in connection with vaccines. Now, that's very interesting because Bill Gates has come out, way out, called people like Dr. Andrew Wakefield a fraud for investigating the connection between vaccines and autism, for investigating autistic children and finding this pattern of abuse in the actual gut flora of the body. Again, an entirely critical center of the body, 10 times more cell in that digestive tract area than in the whole rest of the body. It is crucial we all begin looking at this. And the idea that there's a connection not only between certain types of vaccines, at least alleged and investigated, as well as the genetically modified foods, really continues to tie back to Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, because they're the #1 people monetarily and ideologically pushing both vaccines and GMO across the world, forcing them on everyone. And ever since 2009, investigating gut flora phenomenons and the inability of vaccines to work in the third world with children who have kind of underdeveloped immune systems and the rest of it has been a major priority. It was named one of their top grand challenges. You can go back and read the grants. I'll read you just a couple headlines now so you have a point of reference and you can find this stuff for yourself. We all have to do more research on this. This isn't going to go away. It's going to be a problem. Now, you've got NBC 29 in March 25th of 2011. UVA receives $14.7 million grant from the Gates Foundation to investigate children whose bodies reject the protection they desperately need from diseases that comes in the form of vaccine, and goes on to discuss how they will measure the role of the intestinal bacterial flora or microbiome and the impact of intestinal damage in response to vaccines. Canadian researchers win Gates grants from some weird science. That's in the Globe and Mail. And talks about numerous projects they're investigating, including one on the gut flora. Dina Gibson and Sanjoy Ghosh of the University of British Columbia seek to determine whether improving a pregnant woman's diet ensures her baby has a healthy microflora in its gut to protect it from diseases later in life. Again, you've got to read between the lines. Why are we having this gut flora phenomenon? And they're doing all this research. They're not going to tell you anything other than that they're good people trying to help everyone, but we must read between the lines. Now you've got Gates Foundation's new grant for biomarkers of gastrointestinal gut function and health. You've got The Hidden Epidemic Destroying Your Gut Flora by Dr. Mercola, and a whole lot more. There were dozens and dozens of grants that they gave out in regard to vaccine and gut flora investigation, and they also push GMOs like no one else. Their idea is to genetically modify the Plasmodium beargal parasite so it will activate and teach the human immune system to fight malaria parasite. In another article, Gates Foundation awarded to scientists in Portugal for their innovative research in malaria, and again brings up the risk of vaccine itself in inducing malaria and other ideas about the immune system and the gut flora. So they're into that. That's a fact. It's on record. Look it up for yourself. Do your own coverage. I can't really do it justice. Meanwhile, GMOs are being pushed on the whole world. Our great researcher, Marcos, who also does a lot of the graphics, dug this out from a couple years ago, mutant seeds for Mesopotamia, how there's a totally corporate new non-constitution for Iraq and the occupation there known as the 100 Orders, and it out and out is for corporate dominance of Iraq. I'm sure they're doing this in other countries as well, just as they do through the IMF and other entities. It has things like tax-free remittance for all corporate profits and other laws to ensure that foreign contractors and private security firms have immunity from Iraq's laws. That's just a few pieces from the 100 Orders, but the worst of all, back to one of the most blatant orders of all, Order 81. Under this mandate, Iraq's commercial farmers must now buy, quote, registered seeds. They're normally imported by Monsanto, Cargill, and the Worldwide Wheat Company. Unfortunately, these registered seeds are terminator seeds, meaning sterile. Imagine if the human men were all infertile, and in order to reproduce, women needed to buy sperm cells at the sperm bank. In agricultural terms, terminator seeds represent the same kind of sterility. And it goes on to discuss how there's the whole history of Mesopotamia, a minimum of 4,000 years of seed trading and just organically developing the different varieties of crops there. How it even really goes back 8,000 years BC in that cradle, the Fertile Crescent, and all of that stuff. And how, well, now some genius company is just going to force all these mono-variety seeds on Iraq, and that the farmers will have to buy it. It's going to devastate their agriculture just as it has in India, as is currently underway in Africa, as it's happening in South America, as it's happening in North America. And Europe has fought back, but it's happening there too. And why not? Because you got articles like the one we covered a couple weeks ago in the New York Times, where We the People is losing appeal with people around the world. And basically how the Constitution and Bill of Rights are somehow not good enough anymore, trying to sell people on the idea of their own enslavement as they bring to full bore into the light the corporate governance system under the world government. And again, it's not just the United Nations. That's one organ of this larger world government. You've got these major foundations. Used to be the Rockefeller Foundation was #1. Increasingly, the Gates Foundation is becoming the #1 foundation, even though it's totally interlocked with the Rockefeller Foundation. And they drive this global governance. They make recommendations to governments around the world at the national level. They implement policies at the global level, and they privately fund things they can't get done through government. So they have incredible influence. It's very scary the way they're changing this world. We all have to wake up to this, and now's the time to fight back, if ever. Turning now to our daily quote, and of course we're coming back with that crucial interview with Mike Adams, with the lawyer who is protecting her clients as they try to come after parents who refuse to vaccinate. That is Patricia Finn. That's coming up just after the break. Turn now to our daily quote. Competition is a great thing. No, competition's a sin. That's John D. Rockefeller as they began the super vertical, horizontal, global integration of all business and industry under the larger Illuminati bloodline type families who had already seized a lot of control in the Anglo world, and it went supernova under the Rockefellers and all the things they did through their so-called charitable work. But guess what? Philanthropy is not charity, and they really don't want competition. That should be a message to everyone. Thanks for watching, and Mike Adams coming up with that hard-hitting interview, and we'll have more for you tomorrow. Thanks.